I want to welcome everybody to our test taking tips and strategies seminar at pjtestprep.com. I'm Paul Jury. More on me in just a sec, but let me share my screen with you guys because you don't need to sit here and look at my ugly mug the whole time. Okay, hopefully you guys can all see my screen. Today, we are going to go for the next hour before the breakout subject by subject sections start into some tricks and traps and test taking skills in general. I'll introduce myself briefly only for the purpose of letting you guys know kind of where we're coming from. But I'm Paul Jury. I'm the director of PJ Test Prep. We're a boutique test prep and academic tutoring company based in South Bay. We've been working with El Segundo and South Bay students for, gosh, almost 20 years now. Where we're coming at from this, we do both things. So you guys are studying for your finals right now, and me and my gang of tutors help people with basically every subject that they need help in. As we've mentioned, there's going to be an Algebra 2 section after this, a Geometry section I'm doing. There'll be a Physics and Higher Math level one later tonight. Tomorrow we're doing a Chemistry 1 and a Algebra 1 section. Anyway, that's all like content. We're going to cover any questions you guys have from those things, any concerns you have about, smashing your finals. I also come at this from a different background. We do at PJ Test Prep a ton of test prep, meaning like SAT, ACT, which although there is content on those tests, there's also a test taking art to things where getting questions like not the way your teacher maybe intended you to do it, or certainly not the normal way, is okay on the SAT and ACT. Now with finals prep, we want to do a little bit of both. And so what we're going to cover today is a whole array of stuff. Basically, I want to, in the next hour here, give you guys as many weapons for you to fight against finals just in general, whether it's in high school or in college or SAT, ACT and stuff. We're going to focus on kind of a finals angle on things because that's what you guys are here for. Some of these strategies also can be used on SAT, ACT and on other subjects and beyond. So essentially, we have I put together way more than an hour-long presentation. There's lots of content here, and we're going to skip some of it. But I need you guys to sort of take some leadership here, and I want you to make your own notes as you're listening to this presentation. I want you to realize that being a good test taker starts with being a good student. So be a good student during this presentation and write down whatever you can learn from this. We are going to cover a few things that you probably already know. You don't need to write down stuff you already know, but at some point we're going to throw out a tip or a trick or a study technique or something you can do to smash finals that maybe you don't know. And I want you guys to write that stuff down to hopefully, make this process a little easier in the future. This video is going to be available to review later if I go too fast or there's something you don't totally get. But basically, we're gonna skip through some of this stuff because I want to cover as much content as possible. So without further ado, let's do that. Guys, welcome to Test Taking Skills with PJ Test Prep. First, sort of an overview, and then we're going to talk about a couple basics. I guess you could group the things we're going to talk about today into sort of 4 categories. First is sort of a common sense thing about slowing down and understanding what you're actually supposed to be doing on finals. We're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about tricks, things that you can do when you're stuck. You didn't study for this. There's a question that's too hard. What can I do to maybe get the question right anyway on a final or an SAT or an ACT or an AP exam or whatever? We'll talk, of course, about everybody's favorite strategy on any test, especially multiple choice, which is eliminate, which is sort of a cousin of both the trick and just slowing down and using common sense. We'll also talk a little bit about something I hope you guys are already doing, which is partial credit. But first, some basics. There's a little bit of psychology, guys, to tests, finals of any type. And there's a few things I want to remind you guys just right off the bat here. One of the most important things with a high school final or a college final is to know your teacher. Different teachers give finals in different ways. Different teachers have different expectations for what you should do. What might be a good enough A- from one teacher's grading perspective might be a fat D from another teacher's perspective, because you're taking a Spanish final and you didn't put accent marks. And one teacher might think that's a huge deal because that's not spelling the word correctly. Another teacher might be like, they got the rest of the word right. Sure, we'll give them credit. Know your teachers. Some teachers are very, very picky about stuff. You have to cross every T and dot every I with those teachers. Others are looking more for content, and maybe they're going more for speed. You may have to move a little faster, be a little sloppier. Also, reach out to your teacher. If you're not sure, if you got a new teacher and you're not sure what their style is, ask them. Reaching out to teachers, especially like, on your own time, really shows initiative. It makes teachers more sympathetic to your cause. Sometimes, that can be the thing that pushes a B+ into an A- or a C+ into a B-, that you went and met with the teacher beforehand. And even though you still didn't get every question right, you tried, and you obviously care about this. So this is good on a psychological level, but it's also good for a strategic level of learning what kind of things the teachers want. I had an English teacher in high school who would immediately fail you if you ever spelled a lot as one word. See, it auto-corrected it for me now, but if you write this, she's like, what is this? This is not a word, F. And you just learned quickly not to do that. That was just one weird English teacher, though. That will help you know how meticulous or fast you need to be. One thing we talk about when we get to like the SAT and ACT, the ACT is a super fast test, but the questions aren't as hard. So you need to kind of go through that recklessly, slashing your way through the jungle and not worrying about gardening it as you go. The SAT, on the other hand, gives you more time, but the questions are tricky and complicated and nasty, and you have to really spend your time with them. If I give you a jar of quarters and I say, hey, tell me how many quarters are in this jar within 100, and I'll let you keep the jar. Cool. You don't have to be very careful on that. If I'm like, but you got to do it faster than this guy, you're just making quick piles and giving me a rough estimate. On the other hand, if I'm like, no time limit, but you have to tell me exactly how many quarters there are in this jar, or you're getting nothing, then you might make piles of 4, lines of 10, rows of 10. Okay, that's $100. Here's another $100. All right, I'm going to count it 3 times to make absolutely sure. You never know what can be the thing that knocks an A down to a C just because you forgot to carry a 1 or, multiply a minus times another minus. So be so careful on certain types of tests and questions. And of course, always go down fighting, even if you're BSing. A messy, sad attempt is better than a blank page. And I'm sure some of you guys have seen this before, but are laughing at this. I love this kid's attempt of like, here, find X. Well, here it is. Know your teacher. Some teachers would be like, that's hilarious, I'm giving you credit anyway. Other teachers would be like, this student is obviously not prepared, that's an F. Know who your teacher is and what they will do. Okay, let's talk about some common sense basics on this stuff. Before I start, let me take a quick poll for you guys. Since there's so many questions in here and we're not going to have time to get to everything, I'm going to have to skip some things. I want to know what subjects you guys are most concerned about. Can you give me a thumbs up if one of your subjects of most concern is math? Are you hoping you can get some math tips out of this, or are you not that worried about math? Give me a thumbs up if you want me to talk about some math. Okay, that's almost everybody. Great. How about, all right, pull those thumbs down. How about science? Anybody concerned about science? And yeah, give me a digital or a real life thumbs up if science is something you want me to make sure I cover. Okay, almost the same amount of people. How about English and like humanities, like also the social studies, history, stuff like that, stuff where you have to write papers, read stuff, those finals concerning you. Okay, not as many folks for that. So I'll probably skip the example on this page. But I do want to cover the main idea here. Guys, when you are dealing with any finals question of any type, whether it's science, math, English, whatever, understand what you're reading and what you're being asked. On English questions, especially on like standardized tests, but this applies to like any English question, I tell students often to try to make a prediction. I don't know if you guys have ever been in charge of the grocery shopping in your family or anything like that, but if you go to the grocery store with no list and like no idea what you're there for, you're probably just going to end up with a bunch of Twinkies in your cart. Like whatever looks good, you're like, oh, that looks good, let me throw that in there. And then you don't bring home the ketchup, which is the one thing your mom told you to get. make a list or have some idea of what you're going shopping for before you go in there, and you'll do it not only more accurately, but faster. So similarly on a question, are you being asked to find a temperature in a science problem? Are you being asked to just simply find the answer to what X is equal to on a math problem? Or are you supposed to do the 5 steps of laying out, all the parabolas and stuff, like, oh, I need the vertex, I need the axis of symmetry, I need the, is it opening up or down, is it left or right, are we only doing functions? What do you need to know about this? So this is particularly true with English questions where you may need to be very strict about what is being asked. I'll come back to this later, but in a passage where they are asking about the tone, tone is how happy or sad something is. And if you read this passage and it's kind of like neutral at first, but then sort of positive, anything that's like too positive or not positive at all and just totally neutral, these answers are going to be wrong for that reason. So think about what you are being asked and make sure you understand it. Continuing that on to a science problem, which is a little more relevant to what you guys are looking for. This is an ACT question, but it is something that might appear in your chemistry class as well. So read to understand. On the ACT, I actually usually suggest starting with the graph. And in fact, on the ACT, you often don't even have to read the text at all. I think in your chemistry class, or if you're taking a physics final, I would do both. You might start with the graph. There's a lot that you can learn from it. And we always say focus on the axes with graph problems. So look at this graph here. And even if you are confused about mg or what these weird symbols are or anything, there's some stuff that you can learn just from like looking at this. Here, let me write on our graph. I think even if you stink at science, you probably know what, like, I don't know, time is. You can see that more time passes as we go to the right here. And then here, temperature goes up as we proceed. And it looks like in all these cases, the more time that goes by, the more temperature we get out of whatever the heck these things are, but especially this one. This one really spikes up. Okay, what are these? Remember, when you're using any science or any graph, even if it's a math or a history graph, you want to be looking at your like little clues here. This diamond thing here, that's this one. This is Mg powder. So you could even label on this. Don't be afraid to write on your graph. So this one's powder. This one is ribbon in 100 pieces. And this bottom one is just straight up ribbon. So it looks like the powder does whatever this is a lot more. Now they talk in the text about a flameless ration heater used by combat soldiers to heat their meals in the field. Heat is produced when magnesium reacts with water. Here's a fancy chemical equation that you may or may not need to know. And then they talk about different things, a ribbon, a 1 mole of Fe powder and NaCl were added to this mixture of water at this temperature. The mixture was stirred, and then they measured what happened over time. And it looks like over time, the powder worked the best to heat everything up. The ribbon cut into 100 pieces worked pretty well. The ribbon worked a little bit, but not that well. So based on the graph, which of the following scenarios would generate the highest temperature? Don't be afraid to underline that. Well, we already know we like powder, so I'm probably leaning towards this answer. If I wanted to be very specific, I could say, well, 150 seconds is going to be right here, so roughly about 54 degrees Celsius. And this ribbon just never even gets that high, and this one either. So it doesn't matter how long these are, this is going to be the answer. Understanding your graph, understanding what you're reading before you begin will help this. On the ACTs or on any science-based graph question or series of questions, understand the basic idea of the graph or the picture first, then understand what you are being asked. Don't be afraid to underline things right on your graph and so forth. Okay, I want to spend more time talking about the tricks. Now, these, it's going to sound like I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit. When I describe tricks in reference to like the SAT or ACT, What I'm saying is that I don't care how you figure out what the answer to this problem is. If you figure out that it's, let's say, C, I don't care whether you did it the algebraic way or whether you used a trick like make up numbers, which is a trick I'm going to show you in a second. On the SAT or the ACT, or on many tests that are multiple choice, or on a test with a teacher who doesn't care that much, any way you can get the answer is fine. Now, because you have to know your teacher, there may be times when a trick is not the best way to do it. If your teacher is all about you showing all of your work, getting the answer a weird way where you just made up a number and plugged it in is not going to get you full credit. It might get you partial credit. Most teachers, no matter how you do it, if you get the right answer, they'll probably give you at least some credit. But do be aware of what your teacher wants and expects out of you. If you see problem number 2 and you cannot remember how to do this math, and so you're like, well, I could either just skip it and get a 0 on this problem, or I can at least try to do the problem some other way and hopefully get partial credit. If your teacher doesn't care that much or it's multiple choice, you get full credit for a right answer. If your teacher does care about you showing the work, maybe you could still use this trick, get the answer, and then kind of retro engineer some book work to maybe squeeze a little bit more book work out of it. So like, let's say this problem was out of, I don't know, 4 points. Let's say on your algebra 2 or algebra 1 test, this is going to be 4 points, and we don't know how to do it. So one trick that you can use on many different test formats is a strategy called make up numbers. That's where you just make up numbers for the different variables in the problem to try to figure out a different way of getting it there. Now, since we're trying to figure out X, I'm not going to make up a number for that. But what if I said that A was, actually, you know what? I can make up a number for X. Why don't I do this? Why don't I say that X is equal to 1? No, let's make this even easier for us here. We're going to make X 2, and I'm going to make A also 2. Now, I can't make up all 3 of them right away because I need this problem to work. I'm going to pretend that X is 2 and A is 2. Guys, what's 1/2 plus 1/2? Isn't that just 1? So in order for this to be equal still, wouldn't B have to be 1? Now you may be saying, well, how do you know that X is 2 and A is 2? Couldn't X be 5 and A could be 17? Yes, it could be anything you want, but the whole glory of multiple choice questions is if they give you multiple choice, any number that you make up will work. It has to be. That's what input-output values mean in algebra. So what I did here is I just invented one set of numbers that would make this work. 1/2 plus 1/2 would equal 1. So X is supposed to be equal to 2. So one of these answers needs to come out to be 2. And if I plug A as 2 in everywhere I see an A, a lot of them, and if everywhere I see a B, why don't we do this in another color? Let's make this 1. If everywhere I see a B, I plug in a 1. What I need is one of these answers to come out to be 2. And any answers that don't come out to be 2 are wrong. Answer choice A is 1 minus 1/2, which comes out to be 1/2. That's not 2, and so that's eliminated. B is 1 minus 2, which is, of course, -1. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 2. That doesn't work either. This is, I can already tell this is wrong because there's a 1 on the top and like a 2 on the bottom, so that would be 1/2. That's wrong. This one is going to be a 2 on the top and a 2 on the bottom. And that is, ooh, that's close. That's going to be 1, but nope, I'm looking for 2. Therefore, E is the only answer left. And guess what? It comes out to be 2 over 1, which is equal to 2. E is the answer to this problem. That is not how your math teacher wanted you to do it, but you did get the right answer. So if the assignment is get the right answer, we don't care how, like it is on the SAT, then you're done and you just did the problem without knowing how to do the math. If your teacher wants book work, I think your teacher would probably give you 2 points for getting E, the correct answer. They might deduct 2 points for showing no book work. So maybe you would try to just, I don't know, fudge a little bit of book work here, Maybe you could say, well, I think I need a common denominator of some kind. So what if I multiplied this by a, and then this by, well, I'd have to multiply it by a, so it doesn't change anything, and then x by x, and then I didn't have to do anything to the right side because this is the same as 1, and that's the same as 2, and then I have a over ax plus x over ax equals 1 over b, and then I don't know what to do now. Maybe I just put these together, and then I'm kind of stuck, but I sort of cross multiply. And at some point here, you just kind of write a bunch of scribbles and you just give up. And the teacher's like, well, they got started and they did get the right answer, so 3 out of 4 points. I mean, that's not bad for like not knowing how to do the problem at all. So use tricks if you want to, if you need to, if you can. Do know your teacher though to see if you can backtrack. I'm going to skip this strategy because math teachers are usually a little bit wiser to this one than the ACT is. But guys, if you ever notice that your answer choices are numbers, you can just take them and like plug them back into the problem. So like if the admission for one adult was like, I don't know, let's start in the middle here. If it was 16, so like adults equals 16 and they charge 8 less for child's admission, that would make a child's admission $8. And then 3 adults and then 4 children spent $59 on admission. I think this is going to be too high. This is like $48 for these people. This is like 32. That's too high. So it's not this one, it's not that one, and it's not that one. All those numbers are too high. Oh, I just narrowed it down to 2. And I don't know what I'm doing. You could set up a system of equations for this problem. And if your teacher asked you to do that, that would be the way to get full credit. But if the answers are ever just there, just like glorified guess and check. If they're going to give you multiple choice, then make them eat it. Like throw these back in there. That's a second strategy that you can use. Feel free to finish that one on your own if you want, but I want to keep moving because we have so many good ones to get through. Use tricks, guys, when you're stuck. Here are a couple of other tricks that we can try. Drawing and estimating. Here is a science problem. And let's take a look at it. Here it's another ACT problem, but you might see this on a physical science math or a physical science final or something like that. And let's say you forgot to study your plate tectonic geology section. And when they start talking about facies, you're like, what the heck are those? I've never, what even are those? Okay, don't worry about what those are. Let's just do the old point and click technique. We're going to be asked about facies G. That's this one. And remember what I said about your axes? We have temperature increasing as we go to the right. We have depth increasing the more you go down, as depth does. We also have pressure increasing as you go down. And you actually might know that science, by the way. If you go really deep down under the water when you're scuba diving, it gets very pressurized. Hopefully you learned that in your physical science class. You don't even need to know that though, because they gave it away right here on the graph. We're asking about facies G though, and we're asked about pressure and temperature conditions. Facies G likes lots of different temperatures. Basically anything from 200 on up is fine for facies G. But what kind of pressure does facies G like? Not very much or a lot? Well, kind of a lot, right? Like, how about more than 10? Oh, so the answer's J. That's the only one where pressure is greater than 10. Estimate, guys. You don't have to find the exact answers to things. If you can get close enough, try not to get intimidated as well. This is particularly true of science, but also sometimes a math question just looks like, what the heck? I don't even know where to start. Is there any part of the problem that you could do something to? Can you draw something on your graph? Can you circle something? Like, you'd be surprised at how often just starting with a little bit of thread, coming out of the side of that really gnarly knot in your shoelaces, and all of a sudden you can tug that loose, and then this comes loose, and all of a sudden the knot is untied. Let's say that you were doing this geometry problem. Let's say we've got ABC is a square, so this dude's a square, which would mean this is the same as that, is the same as that, is the same as that. The points are chosen on each pair of adjacent sides to form 4 congruent right triangles. I also like to underline, there's a common thread in math problems where they like to give you clues that aren't numbers. Not always, I mean, number clues are even better, but if they give you congruent, that means all these triangles are the same as each other. Ooh, I drew that one pretty well. So these are all the same, apparently. If each has a leg that is twice as long as the other leg, so you could make up numbers here again, by the way. You could say this is 1 and that's 2. 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 Now that's assuming that x is equal to 1, but that's fine. How do you know it isn't? What fraction of the area of square is shaded? Okay, now the math way to do this is to use the Pythagorean theorem to try to figure out what this is going to be. If you knew that, you could figure out the area of the central square, yada, yada, yada. But what if you don't know how to do it that way? What if you forget? In fact, what if you didn't even notice any of this stuff? Like, what if you just did a bad job of attacking this problem and you just sat there and you're like, I don't know what to do? Well, can you eyeball it? I mean, how much does it look like is shaded? Like 8/9 of it? Does this look like 8/9 of this thing are shaded? That seems too big, right? 1/9? No, way more than that. Way more than 2/9. Oh, look, I already got it narrowed down to 2. And then what would you guess, guys? If you just had to like roughly look at this, do you think this shaded area is like more than half of the whole thing or like less than half? Who thinks it's more than half? Give me a thumbs up if you think the shaded area looks like more than half of the total area. Okay, got a few thumbs up. All right, anybody think it looks like less than half? Okay, well, if I just go with democracy here, 3-1 of those of you who answered, so 3/4, said that it looks like more than half. I think it does too, so I would guess D. I'm not 100% sure about if it's more than half or not, but D seems like a good guess, and guess what? D is the answer. Turns out that it is more than half. And by the way, if you get a little clever with your drawing and you were to make each of these little triangles, it's almost like you're folding over the white corners into the middle and canceling out an equal section. Like this cancels this cancels this cancels this. And we have a whole bunch of cancels, but I still have this left over, like the middle of a tic-tac-toe square, like 1 extra 9. And that's another reason that it's D. So estimating, eyeballing is another thing that you can do. Similar to that is what we would call eliminating outliers. And this, now we're starting to get into non-math and science types of things. So I'll skip around a little bit here. You can eliminate crazy outlier answers. If we're doing more English, I'd cover this root word section. Mal means bad. This is probably a good kind of evidence, so eliminating that answer. I'm going to skip this one as well. Let me look at this next page here that kind of does the same thing. As we start to eliminate outliers, I'm going to actually skip to this page and we'll segue back. Let's actually start with a math problem and then I'll segue back to a non-math problem. If I was looking at problem 27, for instance, you guys know what I mean when I say outlier? An outlier is something that's way off of the usual pattern. You know, if you're trying to figure out the average height of your friends and like everybody is kind of around the same height, but then you have this one friend who's like 7 feet tall, is a glandular freak. He's already been recruited by the NBA. Maybe like you don't count him because he's gonna like really throw off your average. If your test is taking a quiz to see if you get a pizza party or not, and there's like one kid who never shows up and never does anything, you're like, can we not count that kid's score towards our average? You really want that pizza. This kid's gonna ruin everything for us. If the answers to a math problem on any test were 1, 2, 3, 4, and 100, which one's not the answer? 100, right? Like, and here's the way to think about that. If the answer was 100, what kind of garbage wrong answer traps are 1, 2, 3, and 4? Who's going to pick those if the answer actually was 100? So let's say that I am doing a really fast test and I'm on problem 27 and I don't really even have time to read it. I'm just like, oh, it's too much reading. I can't. I'm having a stroke. What you can do is get rid of answers that look nothing like any of the other answers. C is just very unlikely to be right because it's so weird compared to all the other answers. And this is a little bit of an imperfect strategy. I can't guarantee you're never going to have a teacher who like purposely trolls you by putting one weird one in there, or maybe just think it looks weird. But C is less likely to be the answer. If we're really getting desperate, if we're guessing on test questions, C would be a good one not to pick. I also would lean a little bit towards E and A, because there's a general trend among math and often science answers where the answers that look more like the other ones, like more like the decoys, are a little bit more likely to be right. I like that A and E both use 13,000x. Like maybe that's actually the right answer and the other one is there to kind of throw you off. I also see minus 10 million occurring 2 times. So that kind of makes me think that, you know, maybe A is good, maybe E, maybe B. Out of all of these, I sort of like A the best because it shares a lot with this problem and it shares a lot with this problem. And even if you didn't even read this, it turns out A is the answer. Now, again, that is not a very precise way to do a problem. My job here is to, of course, encourage you to study hard, and we'll talk about actually doing things the proper way. But, well, you know, when you approach a test and it's fight to the death with a test question that's going to mean the difference between your grade or your college, like, do what you got to do to get the question right. And I don't know, at least on the SAT and ACT, they like people who are clever and are doing things the other way. And it can also just help you scrape yourself out of a jam when maybe you didn't study a certain thing or they spring a surprise hard question on you. Taking this whole elimination strategy and common sense outlier elimination, we can also do this with reading questions. With, let's say we had a history question. I'm going to actually backtrack to the previous page real quick for this. When you're eliminating, guys, use common sense. We'll see an example of the science. Well, actually, you know, we'll do the science one right here, and then we'll do the history one. Eliminate wrong time periods or subject matter. Also, kill outliers. So we just did an example of this one, but get rid of the answer that's wildly different than all the others. Let's talk about a little common sense here. Let's say that you were doing a chemistry question, and it said, which of the following elements would be densest at standard temperature and pressure? And you're like, oh no, I was supposed to memorize the periodic table and I did not. Well, I guess I'll just get this one wrong and fail. Okay, sure. Or you could, you know, think about this for a second. You don't have to have a working knowledge of chemistry to know what dense means. Like, what's denser? A cannonball or a thing of cotton candy? Like, obviously a cannonball would be way denser, right? Like, what's denser? An aquarium full of air or an aquarium full of water? Wouldn't the aquarium full of water be like way denser? How about an aquarium full of metal? Like, that would be the more dense than either of those things. So dense is like, how heavy is it? How, you know, I mean, how consolidated are the molecules if you're actually trying to be proper about this? But look at these different elements. You might not be that familiar with, I don't know, maybe nitrogen in like an everyday setting, but you know what helium is? It fills up balloons. Do you think helium is very dense? It makes things float. It's probably not very dense. Also, oxygen is like air. So that's maybe not as dense, or it's probably denser than helium because helium floats in air, but it's still air. So that's not very dense. Hydrogen, I don't know. I think that's a gas, and it's at the beginning of the periodic table. So maybe that means it's not very dense. Mercury, isn't that the stuff they put in thermometers? Like, it's liquid and it kind of like goes up the, oh, you know what? Liquid seems like it'd be more dense than a gas would. And also nitrogen. Oh wait, nitrous oxide. I went to the dentist and they gassed me good. I was laughing at everything that happened in the room. That thing, I think that's a gas too. I think this is the only thing that's not a gas at room temperature, and that's why it's the right answer. You can get these problems right with just using common sense. Think about the world around you. Science is good like that. Science is always related to the world in some way. So try to think about where you've seen these concepts in some kind of real world scenario. Okay, finally getting back to this one. We actually gave this example already in the, for any of you guys who are freshmen, if you were here for my study tips seminar and study skills, we did this example. So don't say anything if you already know the answer, or a lot of people do know what the Trail of Tears was. But let's say you're in a history class that you didn't study for, and they ask you about the Trail of Tears. And you're like, I have no idea what that is. Okay, well, look at the words in it, guys. Tears. That doesn't sound good. That sounds bad. So I'm probably looking for something that's bad in my answer choices. And a trail, like what's a trail? Isn't that like a path through the forest or something like that? So they're like, you know, a road basically. So migration, ooh, that's like a trail. But freed slaves, I mean, there's not much good about slavery. I guess freed slaves is about as good as it could be. This doesn't seem that negative. I mean, I guess compared to being a slave, being a freed slave seems not like tears, but like, yay, that'd be good. So I don't really like A that much. Child labor in the mid-19th century. That doesn't sound very good, but I don't see where the trail is. There's also some context you should be thinking about here. Let's say that you don't know what you're doing on this final, but you know that it's a US history class. Oh, probably they're not bringing in stuff from Europe. Okay, so I don't like that one either, both because of that and because of the trail thing. The removal of the Cherokees and other Native American tribes to Oklahoma. That sounds bad. And yeah, I suppose in order to go to Oklahoma, you might have to travel, which might be a trail. So we'll leave that one in for now. Path, that's a trail. Early human migration across the Siberian Peninsula. Not only is that not bad, but maybe you were talking about, like, I don't know, the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries of the United States and not prehistoric era. This is not a, like, you know, history of the world, what happened before any history. So also use time periods. If something's way too outside your time period, or like the Trail of Tears would be like the marches in honor of George Floyd last year. Like, I don't think we're that far along yet in our history. We just studied the Civil War. So yeah, I don't think we're quite to there yet. So look at the time periods too. Conditions on slave ships. Yeah, that probably sounds bad. Coming to the colonies in the 17th century. Is that a trail though? Well, the ship is moving. Voyage of Tears maybe would be more appropriate there, but I think I'm going to go with this one. And of course, many of you know what the Trail of Tears is or have heard of it. Close is good enough, especially on multiple choice. And if you didn't know it, if it wasn't multiple choice, you could still guess that a trail might have to do with travel and tears might have to do with, you know, negative. You could say that the tragic moving of, and then your handwriting gets really sloppy and, you know, that's cheap. And the teacher's probably going to know what you're up to, but maybe they're grading 100 papers in an hour and they're like, whatever. The rest of the answer is probably here someplace. As you can see, I'm not, let me be clear. I don't want to encourage you guys to do sloppy work where you're not studying and you're just like half-assing your way to the answers, but we always want to go down fighting. I hope that you guys will actually have studied well enough that you don't need like any of these tricks ever. You can always just do it the proper, correct way, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And I always want to give you guys backup answers and to remind you that, you know, tests are based on real life and common sense. So sometimes that can help you. Partial credit, always go down fighting. You would be surprised at how many points you can get without actually getting the right answer sometimes. Just as a quick anecdote, and then I'll just kind of screw around with a couple of these. I took calculus 1 as a junior in high school, and then senior year I got a couple years advanced in math. I don't really know how. I think I just didn't like my teacher in 7th grade, and I was like, can you move me up? And they're like, you want to do algebra now? I'm like, yeah, I'll do anything to get away from the teacher. But somehow I ended up in calculus 2 as a senior, and although I'm pretty good at math, calculus 2 is really hard. And I was sort of suffering from senioritis, I have to admit. We were running a Nerf Assassins game, me and a couple of other guys, and people were always running into the math class and explaining how there was a car chase and somebody shot a dart up and shot somebody on a roof, and this kind of thing would not be allowed now. But in any case, point is I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have. when I came to the Calculus BC AP exam, I knew some stuff, but that test is really hard. And I found that on the 4 questions they gave, I didn't actually know how to get the answer on any of them. I couldn't get all the way to a correct answer on any of the 4 problems. But rather than just sitting there contemplating my doom for 3 hours, I figured I would go down fighting and I'd write down as much stuff as I could. So I just covered the page in as many close to what the problem is asking about, partial parts of the problem. I know how to start this one. I just get stuck at this step, stuff that I could. I just wrote stuff for 2-3 hours. And I got enough partial credit to pass the test. It wasn't a 5, but I think I got a 4 or something, or actually I think it was a 3. Without getting any of the problems right though is pretty good. So not my proudest test moment, but an example of, scraping food out of the bottom of the barrel if you have to. So if line segments AE and CD intersect, just start drawing them. Like here's AE, here's CD. Sure, I'll just draw this. I'll redraw it if I have to. Here's B, and if AC and DE are parallel, I can do better than that. Hold on. And I think the parallel line was something like that. Then prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EBD. Oh no, I hate proofs. I don't know how to do this at all. Well, can you at least, you drew it already. Could you like set up the proof formula? And as I'll talk about in the geometry section I'm doing after this, obviously teachers have different ways of doing things, but can you at least write, you're like statements and your reason over here, and then just start writing things like, AC is parallel to DE, and then, given, I think is what many teachers have you right here. And then this is bisected by point B. Oh, we didn't talk about that. That is this segment AE. Oh, actually, that's the wrong one. Then you could just write, my default in geometry would always be like definition of bisect. If you just start writing things like CB equals DB, and then you just write the answer down here, 4 points, I got to give you at least a point or 2 for what you've done so far. And if you can keep going with that, even if you don't get all the way there, scrape as much as you can. You probably forgot the magnesium thing, but if you remember that magnesium is written like that and H2O is written like that, and we're going to get heat out of this heater, I'm going to put a plus heat over here. And I think the magnesium can't be by itself. It's got to be with something. So maybe I'll put an H here, and then I don't know, maybe the O came off of it. And let's say there's 2 of these, and then 1 of those. And then, this already. Maybe I'll give you a point for this. Maybe I'll give you 2 points for this. It's not right, but we're getting there. If you want to see what the actual answer is, look back on the previous page. Go down fighting is what I'm saying, guys. Never just sit there and give up. You got to sit there anyway. You might as well be trying to help future you have college options. Okay. Next, checking your answer. Let's say you were trying to do this problem. And, oh, you know what? I kind of do remember the algebra on this one. Yeah, wait, I think I'm supposed to pull this apart into x minus 2 or x minus 3, I think, and then like x plus 2. Yeah, because, and by the way, here's a pre-check. If you FOIL this back out, yep, I do get a -6. And if I do the inside and outside, I have -3x, positive 2. Yes, that makes -1. So that looks good on my top. And then on my bottom, this, oh, I think I remember this. And this looks like a difference of 2 squares. X plus 2, x minus 2. Okay, sweet. And then I cancel those 2 and I get x minus 3 over this one. Okay, cool. So let me just, I know I get a little sloppy sometimes. So let me check this answer. How can I check this one? Could I make up numbers again? Couldn't I just plug something in here? Like, what if I tried x equals, it's supposed to be bigger than 2, but like, what if x was 4? Well, then this guy would be 4 squared is 16 minus 4 minus 6. That's going to be 6 on the top. And then on the bottom, I plug in a 4 and I square it, and I get 16 minus 4 equals 12. So this, if x was 4, would have to come out to be 6 over 12 or 1/2. If I plug 4 into C, I get, wait a minute, plug 4 in. Uh-oh, something's wrong. I only got 1 6. What did I? Oh, you guys, I know some of you saw this a while ago. I did this on purpose. Oh no, I canceled this, and those aren't the same. I was supposed to cancel this and that. Oh, that's not the, okay, it's this over that, which is actually answer choice B. Well, let me check again in case I did something dumb this time also. What if well, I already did this one, so what if I plugged in a 4 here and a 4 here? I would get 1 over 2. Oh yeah. Didn't know you could check that problem that way, did you? Well, that's where make-up numbers can also help. Even if you are trying to do it the right way, this is a way that you can double check in case you do something bonehead like that. That's why we have to check. Wouldn't that suck if this was a 6-question quiz? You got one wrong earlier because you didn't know how to do it. And this one you should have got, but now you got 66%. Now you're looking at a D+ on your quiz instead of a B. Check it. Guys, I know not all of you are naturally careful people. The world needs all types. Some needs messy rooms. But there's a time and a place to turn on that, anal retentive switch where you pretend like you are a really, really careful person. Math quizzes, your taxes, things like that are what you say to your date on the first date. That's where you take a little extra time and think about it to be careful. So guys, please try to check your answers, even if it's not an easy way to check, even if you have to use one of these weird tricks to check it. Try to do a problem both ways. If they both come out to be the same answer, B, the algebra way and the cheat way, well, then you know you got it. If you wrote all the right book work here, and then you also wrote some other weird stuff, your teacher might be like, what's this part? What are you doing here? But 4 out of 4. Because you did get the right answer. I do see all the great book work here. Okay. What, you wrote too much stuff? They're going to penalize you for that? If you have a really weird teacher who penalizes you for stuff like that, I've never heard of one, but then you wouldn't do that or you'd erase it. Be aware of who you're working with. Okay, so to slowly start recapping this, guys, before I open this up to any questions or get ready for our next seminars, slow down and understand what you were doing, what you were being asked. When I got to college, I was used to getting, A's on almost all my tests in high school, without having to work that hard at it. When I got to Northwestern and suddenly everybody was smarter than me, I was still cocky. And so I went into my first, I think I had a Shakespeare class. And the very first midterm that I ever got, the question that they asked us for one of the essays was like a paragraph of questions. It was like, compare 4 different female characters in Shakespeare's work. How do their time periods dictate their actions? How do they work against the patriarchy and the situations they're put in? Blah, 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 like 4 or 5 of these questions. And I was always great at I had done the research, but I was also great at BSing. So I was like, I'm going to smash this question. I wrote my little butt off. I wrote so much stuff. I, did all the tricks. I also actually knew the content, and I felt like I had turned in a masterful answer. And I got my grade back, and I got half points on that question, and I ended up with a C on the test, on the midterm. And I was like, what the? And I went to go talk to the TA. It's like, I thought I wrote a great answer for this. What was wrong? And she went through and she looked at all the 8 sentences, all the 8 questions they asked me. And she was like, there, this one. You didn't answer this one. And she was right. I had not answered one of the 8 questions that they asked. And that was enough to knock me down to a D on that problem. That's how it gets in college. That's what you got to be ready for. That's what you might face in some of your AP classes. understand what you were being asked of and all of what you were being asked. Don't forget some of these tricks. I'm sorry if I went really fast through some of those tricks. I know some of those are really weird and not like what you learned in school, which is the entire point of them. Watch the video again if you want to see some more of those, or if any of you end up in like my SAT class at some point, we'll cover all that stuff there, because that stuff is so useful on really, really hard SAT problems. They're like, well, I have no idea how to do the math on this. Let me just say that X is 1. Oh, I got C. Cool. How did I do that? Magic. Eliminate, especially on multiple choice, but using common sense to eliminate, paths you wouldn't go down on an essay project problem or something like that. Partial credit, as we discussed, go down fighting. Now, I do want to end this on a responsible note, because I've been giving a disproportionate amount of time talking about like hacks and like not really the way your teacher would want to do it. The easiest way to get good grades on your final, of course, is to like actually do it the right way and know the stuff. So when you are preparing for your finals next week, guys, understand the material. This is a time to go back and be like, if I'm being honest, I didn't really understand that biology chapter. I kind of read it. I know the word photosynthesis was in it a bunch, but I guess if I'm being honest, I don't really know how that works. I don't really know how that math concepts works. I can kind of regurgitate it. Now is the time to actually make sure you understand it. Take notes in your own words, rewrite stuff, see if you can explain it to your friend. If you can't explain it to your friend, then you don't really get it. If you can, though, then you're ready. Review all of the notes you've taken, all the stuff you've done. If possible, practice where you play. Now, this may not be possible, especially during COVID, but there is a good amount of psychological research that shows if students study and do practice in the physical room that they will be taking their exam in, they do better than if they were studying in their bedroom and now they have to go into a real room. So I know this may be out of your hands, but maybe this is something you could bring into the future. Could you ask your social studies teacher if it would be okay if you stayed after school and studied in their room? Maybe you could do that with your chemistry lab. And then this leads into the next one, pre-tests. This is like the single thing that teachers do to try to hand their kids A's. And kids sometimes just don't get it. But if you can get your hands on a practice test, something that sort of resembles what you're going to be doing in the actual test, please, please, please try to take advantage of that. And don't just take it, learn from it, get it graded, like look at all the answers yourself. And the ones you get wrong, my God, now you know what you need to do better on the real thing. Even if your teacher doesn't give out pre-tests to the whole class, you might be able to ask them for one. I have had students just go and approach a chemistry teacher or a pre-calculus teacher and say, hey, I know you didn't really give a pre-test for this, but I was hoping to get some extra practice in. Do you have any like worksheets or anything like a practice test that I could practice on just to see if I got it? Most teachers will try to give you something. Like even if they're like, I don't like to give away my test questions, they'll probably at least give you a worksheet of similar types of things. I've had people, they just gave the kid last year's final. And they said, this year's going to be a little different, but this is basically what it's going to be like. I had one teacher then who got lazy and didn't end up even changing it at all. And the kid like destroyed that final because they had just done it the day before. That's not usually going to happen, but try to take advantage of that if you can. And guys, fight with your new weapons. We've learned a bunch of new things here today that you can try to tackle these problems with. Try to do it the right way. Try to study, try to understand, try to give the teacher what they're asking for. But if you can't, fight dirty, kick them in the junk. All right, guys, resources for help. Ask your teachers, like I've been saying, before, after school, after lunch, on Zoom, however you got to reach people these days. I'm sure some of your teachers are on social media. You can access them that way. Parents and friends can help too. You might have a friend who did this class last year, or a parent who's particularly good at something, or, test classes or tutoring. PJ Test Prep's always here if you guys need some, one-on-one resources or something like that. The last page of our packet is just some info about us. This is old. These prices aren't even accurate anymore. But we are, as I said, PJ Test Prep. Our information is also on the front page of this thing, which feel free to screenshot if you want. PJTestPrep.com is our website. We have a lot of great tutors on staff who can help. Speaking of which, we will have one of our tutors, Michael, will be joining us shortly to take this room over to teach you guys about Algebra 2. I am going to be moving over to the other room, the geometry room, if any of you guys are here for that. So while we slowly start to turn this over, let me take any questions that you guys have. But if you are here for the geometry, you're welcome to leave this room and jump into the other one. Do stick around here if you are here for the algebra room. Okay, questions, guys? Anything I can answer?
Just one question.
Yes, sir.
When you're doing the whole eliminating however many options, what's the likelihood that you're gonna get that right, just from your experience?
Well, there's a two-part question there. One is, if you literally are just guessing, it's a simple percentage. You know, if you really had no idea and you're just randomly picking between 5 options, you got a 20% chance of getting it, which is better than 0. If you are doing educated guessing, though, like you're like, I don't think it's helium because that's in balloons. All right, now you got a 1 out of 4 chance. There are other things that you can do to eliminate, like, for instance, on the ACT or SAT's grammar section, one thing that they always love on those tests is short answers. So if you're doing a grammar test, short answers are going to be more likely to be better. So you're always starting from 20% or 25%, but the goal is to get that up to 50% or even higher by eliminating some ones that won't be there and then guessing between the others. Cool. All right. Other questions? Thank you, William. That's a good question. Other ones, guys? Oh, we got one in the chat. Hold on. Oh, no, those are just thank yous. Awesome. Okay.